The Russian leader has made an official state broadcast regarding the aim of his administration. He said by now Western leaders would understand his intentions. He said the country had spent too long in the back seat of world politics, watching the West enforce their ideals into our culture, and this must stop. He said they've been driven to the use of force. He also warned that the Russian military capabilities are much greater than Western intelligence believes, and that this should be a warning to any leader that may underestimate their strength. Russian intelligence gathering operations have moved beyond mainland Europe to include Iceland and its local waters. Jason Tansley reports.
As expected, the invasion has forced NATO troops to take a purely defensive strategy. The short-term goal is all about survival as the Russians advance upon us. In our camp, the location of which will remain secret, we believe the Russian advance party in this area is only around 6 miles away, although in this mountainous environment it may take weeks before they actually find us. The high-altitude drones will be gathering information about exposed Allied positions, and because of the mountainous conditions, the drones will be crucial to the success of the Russian intelligence gathering efforts. We've stopped running and are now digging in and camouflaging ourselves, hoping to avoid detection. As a result, transmissions may close down for a while.
Efforts by Allied air teams to intercept the Russian high-altitude intelligence drones have failed. The drones are thought to be gathering important information about the location of hidden Allied bases. From one of the bases in Iceland, we have this exclusive report.
We can hear the drones from time to time passing overhead. We know that they will be pinpointing our position and that of those of camps like us. Now we just wait for the Russian troops to advance upon us. The Soviet news agencies reported Russian leader Vladimir Chizikov's second speech on television since the war began. He said that the recent air attacks on troops and civilians in Iceland were barbaric, and that Russia has only targeted military installations, but NATO was now killing people in acts of sheer desperation.
NATO and the United States have reacted to the Russian attack on its North Atlantic fleet by retasking a large naval force to liberate Iceland. The Americans and US-based NATO forces have reacted vigorously at this stage, commandeering huge reserves of troops from the Army and National Guard. At last, the Allied forces will be receiving major support. It's hoped it won't be too late. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. Russia has warned world leaders that unless NATO backs away from Russia's advance into Iceland, they should prepare for the potential of a nuclear attack. Jason Tansley reports.
Only a few years ago, it would have been almost impossible to believe that this could happen, but we must carefully evaluate any threat by the Russian leader. He has said that he has implemented the codes to target NATO countries. The British government has already issued the Protect and Survive guidelines in the national press and television. The government stressed that despite the extreme concern for the volatility of the situation, there is no need for panic. Their advice is to be aware of the safety procedures as a precautionary measure only.
US Air Force Blackbird aircraft have been taken out of storage to fly intelligence gathering missions over Iceland. At the White House, US President Helena Campbell is believed to be concerned that the Russian stronghold on the island will threaten United States security. She's now escalating her country's commitment, much to the relief of the European nations. As the threat of nuclear conflict becomes more real, world leaders have gathered today in an emergency summit. NATO spokesman General Sir Christopher Adams-Bailey says there's no need for alarm, and the threat of nuclear action is just one of the items on the agenda. It's being discussed in terms of precautionary measures only. Russian fighter planes have attacked the plane carrying the Vice President of the United States, John Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood was on a mission to open high-level talks on the crisis with America's NATO allies. He was travelling from Washington to Brussels in Air Force One, the President's Boeing 767, when a US fighter aircraft fought off the Russian attack. Air Force One had to take a longer route than planned. The plane is now off course and it's thought to be low on fuel. We'll bring you more news as it breaks. The bloodiest battle of the conflict happened in a town in the Czech Republic today when NATO and Russian troops clashed in the town of Brno. It's thought that more than 1,000 NATO soldiers have been killed or injured. We have this report from Brno.
It seems that NATO have again underestimated the Russian capabilities. This was a particularly bloody battle that Allied commanders say was a one-sided fight and a complete massacre. In addition to known military fatalities, we must add an untold number of civilian dead. A new type of motion-seeking aerial weapon dropped from ground attack aircraft are believed to have accounted for the vast majority of casualties.
It's been confirmed that the US Vice President's plane will attempt an emergency landing on Iceland. The elite ICE-4 Typhoon Squadron will escort Air Force One safely through Icelandic airspace. It'll be a daunting task and possibly the most dangerous single mission so far. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. The Russian Black Sea fleets engaged in a large-scale battle with the US Navy in the Mediterranean Sea. We now go live to NATO headquarters for more details.
These are the biggest naval battles since the Second World War. Allied forces consisting mainly of US ships are undergoing attack by the Black Sea Fleet. The US Sixth Fleet has been effectively blockaded for the moment. The battles involve high-technology weapons that until now have never been seen in public. Submarines from both sides are said to be inflicting heavy losses on the surface fleets, and the loss of life is immense. There are unconfirmed reports that a Russian nuclear submarine has been destroyed, releasing potentially lethal clouds of radioactive material over the whole of the Mediterranean. Civilians are being advised to stay indoors.
Hello again. The Vice President of the United States, John Eastwood, has been killed, along with many of his top-level advisors. Russian fighters shot down the ill-fated Air Force One in Icelandic airspace. Reports suggest that the scale of the renewed Russian attack was just too great for the ICE-4 Typhoon team charged with escorting the Vice President. America is in shock and is mourning the loss of its highly popular Vice President. He was on a top-level mission to Europe to try to open negotiations with the Russians and bring the war to an end. His death is a setback that will cost both sides further loss of life as the war continues unabated. In Brussels, a statement's been issued expressing the greatest sympathy for the close friends and relatives of the Vice President. That's all for now. I'll be back soon. The Vice President of the United States has been escorted to a safe landing on Iceland. He's thanked the elite Typhoon team and ICE-4, the teams charged with his safety during the hazardous journey. Iceland, though, is still in increasing danger from Russian advances across the island, and the Vice President's future safety is of prime concern. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. A fleet of Russian refuelers has been detected circling off the coast of Norway. Military expert Professor Thomas Moore says their intention could be to refuel medium-range bomber aircraft on their way to Iceland, and that may mean the Russians are planning another attack over Icelandic airspace, which would probably be aimed at the Allied reinvasion force. We'll have more later. RAF Nimrods have detected a number of Russian submarines surfacing 300 miles north of Iceland. There have also been reports of the submarines launching cruise missiles thought to be targeted at the Allied invasion fleet. NATO leaders say they're worried about the lack of coordination between the US Air Force and ICE-4 over the new bombing campaign over Iceland. At least one B-1 airplane has been lost. NATO says the Americans need to set out a clear strategy with the Allies. Claire Montgomery from the EBC Newsroom. NATO has confirmed that more than 60 Russian aircraft have refueled over the North Sea, and as expected, they're on target for the Allied reinvasion force. Military analysts say a battle of this scale could result in NATO not getting through to Iceland with enough resources to regain control of the island. They also say that the reinvasion initiative has taken place too late, giving the Russians too much time to prepare for counterattacks. We'll be back with more updates later. There have been battles on a tremendous scale between the Allied reinvasion force and Russian aircraft. The scale of the fight was just too large for us to speculate on the outcome. The ICE-4 Typhoon team has been at the forefront of the action, helping NATO ships to fight their way through the chaos towards Iceland. Bob Harris reports from Iceland.
The noise is deafening. The skies are illuminated with the flashes of missile firing and explosions. I just can't believe my eyes and ears. I cannot begin to describe what it's like to be in the midst of this utter chaos. I have no idea who or what will be returning back to this airbase, or even if it will be controlled by NATO after this battle ends.
The Typhoon fighter squadrons thought to be helping to escort an American attempt to rescue the crews of downed B-1 bombers. Hopes are fading fast as it's unlikely that anyone could survive the freezing cold, hazardous conditions for long. That's all for now. Claire Montgomery from the EBC Newsroom. It's believed that the Russians have captured the crew of the B-1 bombing missions before the rescue attempts could get close to the area. The Russian news agency says it'll show America that Russia has the upper hand against its high-tech weapons. Claire Montgomery, EBC News. The Russians have stepped up their activity around occupied Norwegian air bases. Using information gathered from satellite pictures, experts say they're probably planning another air attack on Britain or Iceland. Public information films on air raid survival will be shown following this programme. Leaked reports have revealed that both NATO and Russia are preparing for the potential use of chemical weapons. At NATO headquarters, General Christopher Adams Bailey denied that NATO was considering such action, but confirmed it was possible. The media, however, believes that this denial by NATO is designed to throw the Russians into a false sense of security and to stop them from acting first.